Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I am Paul John Dykes. I'm joined by Kevin McCluskey, Sean Connolly. And we're here to talk about Celtic 5, Falkirk 2. That was some turnaround, Sean.
Yeah, and we called it at half-time as well. We said probably going to give the players 15 minutes to try and redeem themselves. And that's exactly what happened and exactly what they were not able to do. They were not able to redeem themselves. And I don't know if I've ever seen 4 changes at once. And that was what happened after an hour. And look, Kuhn came on and 2 goals, 2 assists. And look, Ida was on before already, so obviously Ida is just getting lack of service if you're going to look at it that way. But yeah, Kuhn and Engels really turned that game. I don't know that it was as much on Taylor or Yang. Yang was good. He's certainly an upgrade in Palma, but yeah, we were much better after. We were still abject for 15 minutes, but the last half hour we just ran riot. Falkirk started to tire as well. We just got all over them in the last 10 minutes there. Much better. Yeah. I'm still angry about the first hour, but much better.
No, and this is the thing. We also said at halftime, Sean, you just know Brendan Rodgers will be as well. The guy's he's a meticulous guy who prepares for every game in such a way, so thorough in his approach, and so disciplined as well, that at halftime I think he would have been absolutely incensed at the performance. But like you said, and we did say this at halftime, Kev, you leave them on, and the player that I think that would have benefited most would have been Valle. You hook him at halftime and it could get inside his head. He still looked like a bit of a rabbit in the headlights when he came off and the camera zoomed in on him. There's a player there that we're going to have to nurture. We're going to have to develop, and hopefully he can progress within this winning team. It's pretty clear that Kuhn made the biggest difference of them all. Engels as well, so assured. I said something during the week, and I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you train somebody to do it, but he draws a foul. First thing he did today to calm things down, around about our own box, he draws a foul. He's very good at it. But, Brendan Rodgers will be looking at maybe some of the second-tier players tonight, Kevin, and thinking there's a wee bit of work to be done with some of them.
Yeah, I think so. This was a big game for quite a few of the players that started today. Probably the obvious ones, Valle, Palma, big games for them. Even Ralston, because with the form that Johnston puts in most weeks, Ralston starts a few and far between. Going into the Euros, he was Scotland's first choice right back, having started just 6 games last season for Celtic. Mm-hmm. So every game that he gets, it's also one of those big games that he's got to be putting in a performance. He had a few dodgy moments, but then he steps up with that great pass for, I think was it the Ida's first goal anyway. Going to lose track of all those goals in the second half.
He played the second goal in the game.
Yeah, he the great ball through to Kuhn for that one. Yeah. But yeah, this was a big game for a few players who I don't think really stepped up that were starting the game. And there's a few of them. Valle, you can say, okay, introduction to Scottish football. He might not come up against an Aguiman type player every week. He's possibly not come up against that kind of player too much in Spain. It's just a bit of a culture shock. But yeah, like I said at halftime, put an arm around his shoulder, talk him through things a bit, and get him acclimatised to Scottish football over the next wee while. And hopefully he can become a challenge to Greg Taylor. For others like Palma, he's been here long enough now that he knows the score, and he's coming into this game. He has to put in a performance. And I'd said even at half-time, his defensive side was looking pretty good for a change. He was tracking back and doing stuff. But you only see him having an impact of the game in their final third. He was very poor when he had the ball. And within about 2 minutes of coming off the bench, Yang's had more of an impact going forward, and he continued to do it. Very poor for some of those guys that started. Better for the guys that came off the bench, who are obviously the more established players, with the exception of Yang, who I thought was an upgrade on Palma. But a lot for Brendan to think about, and he probably now goes away knowing that the first 11 is nailed on. That is the first 11. And then beyond that, there's still a little bit of work that the next 11 needs to be improved further, so that we can go into these games, make 8 changes, and not have to make 4 changes on the hour mark to save the game.
Yeah, Yeah. By the way, before we get stuck into some of the good things that came out of the game, fair play Falkirk, Sean. I mean, they came out, and I know, the scoreline at the end of the day, but it looks like a tanking. Wasn't it really a tanking? Maybe the last 20 minutes we turned the screw. But I think the way they approached the game put a lot of Premiership teams to shame today.
Absolutely, and in a very non-confident manner. I had a feeling they would start to, when they started cramping after an hour. That kind of gives you an idea, right? That they're not used to playing at this level, this intensity, and we were probably going to get a bit more chances towards the end. But I was not entirely confident, to be honest, because they had played really well to that point. They had pressed as well. They'd really put us under pressure with the. Any mistake we made, they were really capitalizing on that and really getting it forward. I guess the exception was that kind of one from McGregor about 75 minutes where he just squares it to the Falkirk right winger and he just sends it out of the park. And then after that, the right winger gets hooked. So I think they had a good standard, a surprising standard, given how few of their players I actually know by name. I think Calvin Miller's about the only one I would have been able to name out of them. But some of them are good, and they look like they're going to be. I'd say they'll be coming up next year, and if not, a few of them will be getting poached by Premiership teams because there were some good players there. They were a good team, and John McGlynn again for Hearts, maybe. I don't know.
Well, this is the thing. Brendan Rodgers spoke so highly of John McGlynn. McGlynn was part of his kind of backroom team for a spell, and sometimes there's a form of what would you even call it, osmosis, where someone works with someone, Sean, and they pick up a lot. And I'm not saying Brendan Rodgers made McGlynn, but you look down the ages at the amount of people that branched off from the likes of Bobby Robson, who worked within an environment and a culture and took a lot from it. McGlynn is a decent manager. What he's done at Falkirk's been brilliant, and fair play to him coming out there. I won't forget that in a hurry because there was a great deal of anxiety watching that game going into the second half when the substitutes were finally made, and thinking to myself, right, on paper, Kuhn should make a difference. Engel should make a difference. Taylor should kind of settle the back line. Yang versus Palmer, not so sure, but I agree with Kev. I think it was an upgrade today. And you're thinking we've got to make an impact, but it still took 10 minutes, Kev. I thought Falkirk really dealt with just about everything we threw at them. I want to talk about some of the guys that came on, but before I do that, Lewis Palmer, the guy, honestly, he's created so many dilemmas in my mind since he came to this football club. Another guy that did similar to me was Haksabanovic, whereby he would do things and you thought to yourself, technically, he's got it. But for some reason or other that is probably beyond us because we don't see him working on a daily basis, I'm no longer sure he's got a future. And I'm not basing it on today. I'm not basing it on an hour against Falkirk today, right? I just think that, we're 2-1 down. This is just before the substitutions, not long before 5 minutes before he gets hooked, right? And him and Valle start doing a wee back heel competition down the left. And I'm thinking, we're getting beat 2-1 here. And they're back heeling the ball. We eventually lost possession as a result. It's great if you score a goal after doing something like that, because obviously Ida was back heeling the ball before Kuhn pulled that one out his pocket. But I'm looking at Palmer and I'm just not sure he's going to have what it takes here, Kev. Technically, he will go away as he did prior to signing for Celtic, and he will excel. He'll probably be a team's best player with the most amount of assists and goals. I just don't think he's got what it takes, whereby there's a discipline attached to it, especially on the wing for Celtic. And he didn't create enough, but it's an attitudinal thing as well, whereby we're 2-1 down and he's back heeling the ball and we're losing possession. That is so frustrating. You could hear the derision coming from the stands at that point. You want someone to create a chance. Fast forward a few minutes, Ralston plays that ball. Would Palmer have made that run that Kuhn made that you're talking about? Would he have made that run? And this is the big thing. I now have severe doubts about Lewis Palmer after today's game. I don't want to come across all negative. It was brilliant the way we finished the game, Kev. But I think I've had it with him, to be honest with you. And you know what? Yang, they were level pegging, even though I know that the data tells me that Palmer's a player who will create more goals for you. Yang came on and actually made an impression for me. He was far more positive.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just based off today, the hour today. This is a conversation that we've had since last season, probably since, I don't know, after maybe 10 games of last season, because Palmer started really well. He was influencing games, he scored a few long range efforts, was beginning to make inroads in the team in Europe. And we thought, hang on a minute, maybe there is a player here. And then there just became a point, maybe 10 games into the season, where it all started to go wrong from him, and he's really stopped influencing games from that point on. I've called him a maverick because I think that's what he is. I think he's a player who's got it within him to do something really spectacular in a game, but you cannot rely on him to do it. Because the other point that you've made about Engels, when he comes on and you see he's got this ability to win a foul, it's because he's got game intelligence.
Yeah.
Right? He knows where he needs to stand. He knows how to position himself between ball and opposition player. He's going to draw a foul. You get a free kick, it calms things down. Palmer tries back heels in the halfway line. It's Palmer that tries the World Cup pass against Aberdeen in the last minute of extra time in the Cup semi-final that leads to their second equalising goal.
Yep.
There's just too many instances where if you read a match report and you go, ball given away by Celtic player leads to goal, the Celtic player's name is Louis Palmer. It's his name that just crops up. So undoubtedly there's ability there. I don't think he's a winger. I think he's a number 10, and that's maybe where you get the best out of him. But he doesn't have the discipline to be a player for a club like us, where you need to be on it all the time, as we said before. And when you come into the team after a long spell out, you have to grasp that chance. You don't do anything stupid. You just go out there and you perform. And that's where I'll probably now always back Yang over him, because Yang comes off the bench. He is a limited player. We know that. We've seen him for a year to know this. But the first thing he does is he gets the ball and he drives at the Falkirk defence. He tries to take us forward. He tries to take his man on. He gets a couple of shots away, and he looked a better prospect than Palmer. So, yeah, as much as we would all love to see Louis Palmer make that positive impact in the hoops, I just don't think it's going to happen. I think Brendan's given him enough chances. If he was to go in January, I don't think there would be too many tears shed at his departure.
Well, the thing is, Sean, if you have a poor performance like we did in the first hour of today's game, what you're trying to draw from that is some kind of learning. And we've heard the cliche about learning from players in adversity. If you're in the trenches, as Palmer the guy you're going to look at to dig you out. And I remember talking about Jota when he was at Celtic and thinking that there was a certain point where you wanted to see that dig, and it came against St Mirren away. And I remember at half-time, we had been rubbish and really rotten in the first half. And he dug out a goal out of nothing. And it was a scrappy goal. It wasn't your vintage Jota-esque goal. It was one of the ones that's never going to be on your show reel. But after that game, I remember thinking that in order to make it with the Celtic team in Scottish football, where things can get really, really I don't even know what the word is, difficult with regards to flair. You've just got to dig it out and win ugly and stuff like that. Sometimes your wingers have to do that. I don't think Palmer's up to it. Am I being too harsh on him?
No, I don't think you are being too harsh, to be honest. I think we learned a few things today. It kind of strikes me a little bit. I don't know if you remember the game where when we'd wrapped the league up under Ange and we put a few backup players out against Lazarus FC, and things we learned that day were like Kobayashi can't defend, can't play at this level. And today there was a little bit of that. And one of the things that you would pick up from that is that Yang's probably now fourth choice winger ahead of Palmer, and I don't think you're being harsh saying that. It baffles me though that how reliant we were on this guy just a year ago, how he was pulling out last minute wins for us. I don't understand what has happened to that player. It might just be that, or we were just absolutely scraping by last year, and we've just raised our standards so much that he just can't meet that standard. It's the only thing I can really think of that really makes sense. Another two things I learned today, picked up, gained more information on, and I'll disagree slightly with Kev when he said earlier Rodgers knows his starting 11. I think there was actually a couple of bits that came out today where it kind of calls into question. I would say maybe Ida is put in a good shout to be starting ahead of Kyogo. And I would also say Bernardo's put in a good shout today to be in ahead of Hatate. So, yeah, I think another thing I might say is it does show us a bit of a drop off in quality after our first 15, 16 players in terms of, Champions League level players, for example. But yeah, that was my kind of takeaway from today. I don't think you're being harsh on Palma. I think he was very, very, very poor. I think Hatate was very poor, but we've also seen Hatate play better. So
yeah,
there was information that came out today other than just a good progress in the cup.
And this is the thing, I'm always really reluctant, as I was at half-time, to pinpoint a player and give them the flack. But Palma, as you said, Kev, this has not been a couple of games. This is a point where you're dealing with a manager in Brendan Rodgers who has, let's be honest, he's worked with a lot better than Lewis Palma. And the difference is they've done what they're told. You've got to play to the vision that Brendan Rodgers has. I think he is a maverick, and I think that's going to work against them, Kev, because there are times where he just wants to do whatever he wants to do. And you think, right, let's try and build in a wee bit more of a defensive player in Palma. We saw it a couple of times in the first half. It's never going to be a natural thing to him. But on the flip side of that, losing the ball far too cheaply, like he did against Aberdeen in the semi, which could have, cost us the game last season, like he did today when we're getting beat 2-1 and he thinks that I'm going to showboat. Come on, mate. Right, we've got the
Sorry,
draw.
Can I just interrupt? Celtic have just came out in the draw, and we are playing against number 3, Aberdeen.
There you go. We're playing the second best team in Scotland in the semi. All right.
That means Lazarus versus Motherwell, another game.
Okay, Doc. Okay. Let us know your reaction to that whilst we talk about some of the more positive aspects of today's game. I think we've got to talk about Ida. We've got to talk about Kuhn. Both of them get braces today. But I want to start off with Kuhn because you are reminded on a regular basis if you get something wrong. So every single time Kuhn has a match-winning performance, I'm going to dig out what I said in pre-season where I suggested that he was going to be the star. He was going to be the guy this season, Kev. And he followed that up with a very, very good pre-season. I remember the 2 games against Ayr in Queen's Park thinking, maybe I'm going to have to eat my words here. He wasn't that great. And then we started playing decent opposition in the likes of Man City and Chelsea. And he really... There was a switch was flipped for some strange reason, and Kuhn has had a great start. I was just having a look at his stats, very, very base level stats. So he has now played this season 8 games for Celtic. He scored 5 goals and had 6 assists. But if you look at his minutes, 495 minutes, it's a goal or assist every 45. Those figures are sensational, Kev. And he, for me, was the game changer when he came on today. If he can keep it up, if he can turn that on in the Champions League, then I think that what we have is a player who has been given opportunities at big clubs before and never been able to realise his potential. This is the type of player Brendan loves.
Absolutely. So the phrase that always gets thrown about with signings that we make is they're a project signing. Kuhn is a Brendan Rodgers project, I think, because he's a player that has come in with a fairly high base level of ability, but also a pretty high ceiling as well. Mm-hmm. Similar as Matt O'Reilly coming in. And Rodgers is the kind of coach that can coach players to that level. If you talk about the pre-season games, I don't really read too much into the first couple of games because you're coming back from your holiday.
Lawson Lowell looked brilliant in the first 2 games.
Did he? Good enough for Stoke to spend 3 million on him, I suppose.
Yes.
But we'll beg to differ on that one. But those games, you don't read anything into them because it's about getting fitness. Then he's gone and put the performances in against Man City and Chelsea, and the part of my mind goes, I don't read too much into that because they're a couple of weeks behind us. So we didn't know exactly, I wasn't sure exactly what level he was at, but he has been absolutely phenomenal at the start of this season. Those stats that you rhyme off, you can say that they're very high level or whatever, but they're fantastic, aren't they? For a winger, 5 goals already, 6 assists. If it's a goal contribution every 45 minutes, that's phenomenal. Mm-hmm. Whether he can keep that up throughout the course of the whole season remains to be seen, but he's been unplayable at times so far this season, and it's been such a great step up to see from where he was last season. where I think there were maybe a few doubts as to whether he was worth that 3 million. But he's been brilliant. We needed him today to come off the bench and to kind of rescue the game.
Yeah.
And it's really good now that we've got somebody from that wide area that you can kind of rely on. First since the aforementioned Jota, who's going to get us goals and assists. And I'll remember when Kuhn signed for us, and you rhyme off the teams he's played for before. I think he says in his first press conference he's come to Celtic to get into the German national team. And you look at the players that are ahead of him, and you think, I'm not so sure that's going to happen. If he keeps up this kind of form, someone's got to look at him and put him in there, even just as a number 26 in a 26-man squad. But the form that he's on just now is meriting people, I think, waking up and taking notice of how good a player he actually is.
The thing is, I remember when Jota finally broke into the long list of a Portuguese squad. And I think that when he comes in as a Benfica reserve player to Celtic, if you had been speaking about that as an aspiration, people would have scoffed at it. I much prefer when a player comes to the football club and says, you know what, I think that performing for Celtic in the Champions League will give me international recognition, rather than, oh, I want to move to the Premiership. How often have we heard that? I want to move to a bigger league. But Nicholas Kuhn, I think one of the big things, like, I totally get what Kev says here, Sean, when he's talking about a Brendan project. He's looking at Kuhn at the age of 24, and he's looking at the fact that he spent time with Leipzig, he spent time with Ajax and Bayern Munich, and he's never played a first-team game for any of the three clubs. He's then went away and kind of made a name for himself at Rapid Vienna, whilst all the way through the age groups, 15s to 20s, getting recognition at international level. But something along the line hasn't gone to plan in his career. Rodgers is that type of manager, isn't he, that he thinks, I can get that out of you. I can maximise your career.
Absolutely, and he says it repeatedly. He's here to coach the players that are given to him, but also I think that's just where we are in terms of the markets we're in. Obviously, Engels is the big outlier in that, but generally we're looking for players in the lower end that are not at the level they could potentially be at, and we're trying to get them to that level. And Kuhn is, I remember February, we were all like, oh man, this guy, like, he was just cutting in from the wing and just sending shots into the stands or out for throw-ins, and we're just like, we've got this guy in a 5-year contract, and we were like really worried. And then like around about I think about April, he started to get a game on, and this season he's front runner for Player of the Year. He's my man in a match today easily. And look, if I guess a lot of people think you need to play more than an hour to get man in a match. If you want to apply that criteria, then sure, Bernardo. But I thought Kuhn turned the game, and 2 goals and 2 assists in half an hour, man in a match for me.
Yeah, and you look at his price tag. You know, we got him for under £3 million. It does show that, as well as trying to up the ante in the transfer windows, there are still bargains. But often it is that type of player that's a wee bit broken, hasn't really fulfilled his potential. And you marry that up with a coach like Brendan Rodgers, and then you can get the magic that we're seeing right now. People might think we're losing our minds about a victory over Falkirk. He's done it all season. Nicholas Kuhn has been brilliant all season. And long may it continue, because their figures are pretty impressive at this stage. I'm going to go back to something that Sean said before, where we were talking about the start 11 and how it picks itself, etc. Paul Leinster brings the point up that the midfield needs to be McGregor, Engels, and Bernardo. Hatate is beyond casual. Let's have a wee chat then, Kev, about this relationship that Rodgers has had with Hatate since he came to the football club. Obviously, it wasn't his first choice in the first competitive games. He opted to choose David Turnbull. We then went into the Champions League. There was injuries in between, of course, and Bernardo was getting the nod in the Champions League last season. He didn't make any comment at the time, Brendan Rodgers, but at the start of this season, he spoke about the difficulties that Rio had in that first campaign under Rodgers. He obviously wasn't sold on how Rio Hatate had failed to adapt his game to Rodgers' style, but he seemed a lot happier at the beginning of this season, Kev. That was poor from Rio today, and if you're going on form, he does have to drop out, because Bernardo and Engels would need to start.
He does, yeah. So it was me that made the comment about Brendan will know he's starting 11 from this game, and then Sean's kind of thrown in the Bernardo. That's my midfield actually as well. So I'm projecting my starting 11 on Brendan with that one. I think because I think sorry, don't know if you were going to say something there, Sean. Sure.
No, I was just saying sorry for chucking you under the bus.
Right. No, it's fine.
Never apologise for doing that.
I do agree with you on it. Like I say, I'm projecting my 11 on Brendan, thinking that he thinks the same as me, which we really hope he doesn't at times. But I think we've seen too much at times from Rio that he's a Class A player. He really is a top player. But these games happen too often, for me anyway, when he just doesn't look interested and he doesn't show up and his final pass just isn't there. We just spoke about Nicholas Kuhn in his press conference and him saying how he wants to use coming to Celtic as something to get him into the German national team and how he can play at the Champions League level, and it's not about coming here to move somewhere else.
Yeah,
I've always had the impression with Rio, or for the last 18 months, let's say at least, he's kind of trying to work his ticket to move out. He feels that Celtic is a club to get him to the Premiership. And we've all become body language experts in COVID and the Neil Lennon season. But when he comes off today, he just looked totally disinterested. It didn't bother him that he played pretty crap, to be fair. It didn't bother him that his level of performance had dropped so much that he was getting taken off against a lower division team because someone else had to come on and rescue it for us. So I'll agree with anyone that's putting those views forward that maybe now is the time to take him out of the team. I'll reiterate it for anyone that wants to think I'm having a go at him. I think he's a really good player. We definitely need him. But I don't think he now fits into the best three in the midfield for a Brendan Rodgers Celtic. And Bernardo, for me, does it. Engels is obviously there. I think he was fantastic again when he came on. McGregor's your captain. So that's your midfield three. And now it's up to Rio to show how much he wants to be at Celtic by fighting to either get back in the team, or if he starts in the next game, to put in a performance that's worthy of playing the full 90 minutes and owning that jersey again.
One of the big things for me, Kev, is the fact that Bernardo and Engels are Rodgers' signings, right? McGregor's a player he worked with, extensively in his first period at the club, and Hatate. By the way, I've said it all along. He was one of my tips last season. He's a talented player. But you need to work at a system. You need to fit into a system. And if you don't do that, you won't be playing when it comes to Brendan Rodgers. Listen, it's one game and we know he can be a game changer, that playmaker in the midfield. I'm not writing him off. It's a great headache to have if he's on the bench. I'll tell you what, you're looking on the bench and Hatate's there. He is a game changer, so it's a good headache for us to have. The other player I want to talk about before we wrap this up and get some comments in as well is Adam Idah. Adam Idah, the transfer saga seemed to roll on a wee bit longer than everybody wanted, Sean. And we were talking about him getting off the mark. He thought he did against Hearts. The goal was chopped off. He gets his goal the other night, and that's his first ever Champions League game. He scores in it. And then, I thought today he did show that there are certain games where Adam Idah is your centre forward. It's not about having a first choice centre forward. Depending on the game, you either play Kyogo or Idah. But when Idah steps in, he showed today what he can do. And again, listen, the opposition, you could argue, they're a league below us. I don't even regard them. I think they're, like I said at the beginning of the game, better than maybe even 3 or 4 clubs that are in the Premiership at the moment. And I thought Idah stepped up. I wish he had got his hat-trick. And he can start. If you were to look at the minutes he's played, again, I've not looked at them. I was looking at Kuhn's earlier. Since he came to Celtic, what a return he's had in terms of goals as well, Adam Idah, because a lot of the goals he scored last season were off the bench, and the same thing happened during the week. Kyogo gets a rest, but fair play Idah, and hopefully that's it clicked for him now.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, he's a different striker from Kyogo. Idah's not going to score that goal that Kyogo scores in the Derby game. But then by the same token, Kyogo's not going to score that second goal that Idah scores today. Not to say that Kyogo can't take a good touch like that, but Idah still has to muscle through a defender to get onto the end of his own touch. So if it wasn't for dodgy VAR, he'd have 4 goals in 3 games now, and we'd be talking about he's the informed striker. And I still remember 2 or 3 weeks ago, Paul, having the conversations with you, comments, people saying he's a waste of money, blah, 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 blah. And we were sitting here going, "Nah, he's just rusty. It'll click. He just needs to get up to speed." And here we are. That's
no, you're right. You're spot on, and it's a great situation to be in as well. We talk about Hatate or Bernardo starting a game up top. You've got the same dilemma, and I hope in January we go in there and we buy another quality winger, preferably one who can play on both sides, and then we have an issue there as well. A very good issue for the manager to have on the wings. Albeit Yang looked good when he came on today. David Beattie tells us that we've got Aberdeen in the semis. Last point of discussion: Kevin McCluskey, Aberdeen. Impressive. They're impressive since the new gaffer came in, unbeaten. Great run. They didn't even go on a run as long as that since when Fergie was in charge at Aberdeen. And they will be, I think, a very, very tough opponent, both in the league that's coming up next month and in the cup as well.
Yeah, I think this is the draw that everybody probably wants to see because it's Scotland's two biggest teams that are playing each other in the semi. You probably want it in the final right enough, but we've got it around early. I kind of, obviously, jokes aside, it's not a joke, is it?
You'd have been better.
You'd have been better
digging that out at half time because there was a lot more Union Jacks popping up in the comments at half time, Kev. They were all getting a wee bit excited.
Yes, I'm a bit slow with that one. But I'm sure they'll be watching in anyway later on tonight, so they'll hear it then. But I think it is, like, as I say, jokes aside, it is the game that everybody probably wants to see because it is the two form sides in the country. It'll be a really, really tough game. Jimmy Taylor seems to have them really well organised. As he said, they're breaking all their own records in terms of unbeaten runs and starts to the season. And some of their business in the transfer window was pretty impressive. So they've gone out, they've spent a bit of money, they've invested some, but nowhere near all of Majowski's transfer fee. So they've still got that to play with in January. So they could become even stronger after that. Mm-hmm. So this will be a game I think we can all look forward to as being a proper cup tie. Like we've had one today, but it was only for really 60, 70 minutes until Falkirk started to tire and our first team came on and won the game. This will be a proper old-fashioned cup tie in that way. That at the moment it seems like it could go either way. We'll get a right good game from Aberdeen. I'm really, really, really looking forward to that. And the league game that comes up is it next month as well. Mm-hmm. It'll be a real good test for us to see how we cope with that and how Aberdeen cope with it as well.
Yeah, the big thing for me, Sean, was Aberdeen have got an opportunity to do something this season. And as Kev says, maybe they need that couple of extra players in January. But I'll tell you something, going into this game against a much better Aberdeen side than we faced in the semi-final last year of the Scottish Cup, and you know how difficult that was, it's a huge task for Celtic, regardless of our form. We're looking good. Aberdeen will give us a brilliant tie in the semi-final.
They're on a run of form that if it was happening to a team in blue in Glasgow, the manager would be getting linked with Real Madrid and Barcelona in the Red Tops. They've won 11 out of 11 this season. They've not lost a game in 90 minutes since the 13th of March. The only game they've lost in that time was when we beat them in penalties. So, it's going to be a tough game. And as you say, we are facing them in the league before that. I think the date is 19th of October. So it's coming up. It's a few games, not too far away. And I think that'll be a real interesting test. It's at Celtic Park as well. So yeah, we've got them. I'm not actually sure when the cup tie is as well, but I think something will need to get moved for that. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be hard. It's good to see some challenge from somewhere else.
Yeah, it is. Big games coming up. Obviously, St Johnstone at the weekend, followed by Dortmund away. And we'll be here for every single kick of the ball. Thank you, every single one of you, for getting involved. 1,000 strong. Give us a like, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. We are heading towards 30,000 rapidly. And all your support is always appreciated. 1,000 strong today on the live stream. There are 80 tickets or so left for the Gordon Strachan and John Hartson gig in Glasgow next month. Come along, join the fun. There's live music there as well, big screen visuals, always a good night. And of course, Strachan and Hartson will be dynamite box office. Thanks everybody for getting involved, and thank you to Sean Conley and Kevin McCluskey for joining me on a Celtic State of